Okay, good day everyone. So, we have our second lesson for today. It is first language acquisition versus second language acquisition. So, if you still remember the last lesson, so we talked about the origins of language. So, where did language came from? Did it came from imitations from animal sounds? Did it came from uh, our emotions, our reactions to certain things or phenomena? Or did it came from ourselves, within ourselves, innate, due to some mutation in our body? Or was it because of necessity? Because we cannot use our hand gestures anymore because we have now tools? Or was it a gift from God? So moving on, so our second lesson is about how we acquire that language. So again, we have first language and we have what we call second language acquisitions. So of course, let's first have first language acquisition. So it is studies infants acquisition of their native tongue. Yeah. Oops. This is the acquisition of the mother tongue, the process by which humans acquire the capacity to perceive and comprehend language, as well as to produce and use words and sentences to communicate. Language acquisition is one of the quintessential human traits because non humans do not communicate by using language. So, again, going to our previous lesson, so making sounds and making noise is different from using language. So simple sounds may contain messages, but it is still not considered as language. And the only human or the only animals that can use language are we humans. So moving to the how we input or how we input in first language acquisition. So when we say input, it is where human infants are certainly helped in their language acquisition by the adults in the home environment. So we have the baby talk. It is where speech style adopted by someone who spends a lot of time interacting with a young child. So of course, when you speak with a baby, you don't speak like how you speak with your mother, with your friends, with your co-workers. You speak differently, maybe in a childish way or in a much more simple way. For example, we have here the simplified words tummy, mama, poo poo, pee pee, and of course, others. So in first language acquisition, when we say input, it is how human infants are learning, how they understand, how they develop language. It is our way of helping them. So this is what we call the input. And in input, how are we helping them learn language? By baby talks. Ano? Yan. So in baby talks, we have what we call the caregiver speech, also described as motherese or child-directed speech. There are four types of caregiver speech, and these are the frequent use of questions, often using exaggerated intonations, extra loudness, and a slower tempo with longer pauses. So, of course, again, I'm going to say this that how we speak with the child or with the baby is different with how we speak with a adult or let's say mga 7-year-old child. It is still different. So for example, We play games with the babies like peekaboo or what's that. But for normal people, of course, we no longer do that. So an example of a caregiver speech is here is our situation. So Allison, the child, so tumbles, takes doll out of truck, knocks truck over. Then the mother will say, so tumble tumble, where is the truck going to go? Where will the truck go? So as you can see, the mother is not speaking normally. She is speaking in a way for the baby to easily understand. So baby talk. So we have what we call already extra slower tempo with longer pauses. So of course, if you're going to say this, so of course in a slow way and with slower pauses in order for the baby to be able to catch up. Next, frequent use of questions. So we have already two questions here. Next, extra loudness. So why do we need to be extra loud? Of course, again, to be heard by the baby or by the infant. So of course, yeah, let's continue. Allison reply broom again. Frequent use of questions. The mother says where. Allison's reply pop up. Mother pop up question to see pop up question. And then again, Allison's reply no. Again, frequent use of question. Mother will say no. Where will the truck go? So as you can see, it is maybe not the four types, but the four ways of caregiver. Ano, caregiver speech. Yan. Ways na lang. Yan. So, often using exaggerated intonation is also connected to extra loudness in order for the children or for the infants to hear us. Of course, slower tempo is for them to understand us because they may hear us but they may not understand what are we saying. And frequent use of questions. So because infants can only speak few words. So as parents or the parents doing their baby talks, they're the one asking questions and the babies are just answering in short message words. Ano? So moving on. So we have what we call the acquisition stages. So these are the stages of a child in which how they learn language. So we have the cooing, the babbling, the one-word stage, the two-word stage, and the telegraphic speech. So for those who are going to be parents or those already mothers, fathers, so this will help you understand how your child speaks or learns to speak. First stage. So this is between 2 to 4 months. So the cooing. So the child gradually becomes capable of producing vowel-like sounds such as I and U sounds. Repetition of the vowel sounds, usually it is expressing satisfaction or pleasure. So yan, usually mga between 2 to 4 months, the babies are able to create sounds only. But it is their first step in acquiring language. Next, babbling. So this is 6 to 8 months. Now, the child produces a number of different vowels and consonants, such as ba ba ba, ba da, which at times can almost sound like a real speech. So, uses consonants such as B, M, D, and G. Yeah, so during the 6 to 8 months, so the child are or the infants are able to somewhat copy what are the simple syllables or consonant sounds that the adults or the people around them are saying. Moving on, we have the one word stage. So, from the name itself, one word only. So, between 12 to 18 months. So, 1 year and 6 months. So, it is able to recognize, so infants are able to recognize one or two words. So, resembles words or simple phrases. So, they are able to understand and say complete phrases, simple phrases, or simple words. So, words that utter everyday objects such as milk, cat, spoon, or in Tagalog, gatas, pusa, kutsara, or tinidor. Yan, wala yung fork. Okay, so during this stage, they're able to speak words now. Not no longer syllables or sounds, consonant sounds or vowel sounds, but complete words. For example, oh, even though we are not directly teaching children, if that children is always at the TV and they hear someone says remote and another person gives the remote, so they will understand that the remote, when they say the remote, they will be given the device to change channel of the TV. So they're able to speak the word remote. Everyday items. Okay, moving on to the two-word stage. So begins around 18 to 20 months, at least 50 different words, simple sentences, grammatically incorrect, and perhaps missing information. Variety combination words appear. For example, baby chair, daddy car, more milk, cat bad. Okay, so in the two-word stage, so they have learned quite a lot. So they may have learned at least 50 different words. So at least 50. So this is only the minimum amount of words that your children or infant has learned. They may learn more words depending on the environment. And they're able to speak in simple sentences, although grammatically incorrect and sometimes misleading because of missing information, because they're unable to still speak in complete sentences. And they, with the words that they have learned and understand, also learn to speak, they have a different variety of combinations. So they may have combinations of baby chair, daddy car, such as baby chair, daddy car, more milk, ma, or the cat is bad, or the dog is bad. And of course, again, perhaps missing information. Because of this missing information, some of their words or some of their sentences might have misleading messages. For example, here, the phrase baby chair. Let's say your child is going to you. Say, Mama, baby chair, please. Uh, so it can be stated or taken as a request. So that maybe the baby or the child wants to be put in his chair. Or he just wants to say that, Hi ma, I'm in my chair. So as a statement. Or he just wants to show you, of course, children are very cute, or babies are very cute. He wants to show you that this is his chair or her chair. Maybe the chair is very bright, colorful, and the baby or the infant is very proud of having that chair. Okay, moving on to telegraphic speech. So this is between 2 to 3 years old. So the child begins producing a large number that could be classified as multiple word speech. So when we say large number of words. Sorry for the missing words. So the child's vocabulary has grown to hundreds of words, not just simple 10, 50 words, but hundreds, lots. During this stage, and pronunciation becomes more clearer. So they are able to pronounce better and more clear. So almost complete sentences. The word is almost. So of course, they're still learning. They're able to say much clearer, much easily understand sentences, but it's still not complete. Correct and proper word order. So sometimes when they are a child, they don't know where to place the pronouns, the subjects, but now they understand how or what to say first. Maybe sometimes cat bad, the ate apple. Now they're able to say bad cat, it ate apple, my apple. So much better sentence. So of course, during this stage, they also develop physically. Usually, they're able to run and jump, but we're focusing on the speech. So, because of they're able to have physical movements now, they have learned to speak, but also to move. They can uh, join this or fuse this with their actions. So, this shoe all wet. So, the child may be pointing at the shoe. Daddy go bye bye. So maybe the child is waving goodbye. Or cat drink milk. Okay. So if we have the acquisition stages, remember these are only the moments in their life that in which they acquire or learn language. So the stages only. We have the cooing, babbling, one word stage, two word stage, and the telegraphic speech. We still have the acquisition process. So how do they learn to acquire language? So we have learning through imitation, learning through correction, developing morphology, developing syntax, and developing semantics. So the first is learning through imitation. So long story short, although I will still read this, long story short, it is like from our origin of language. They learned by copying. Ano? So basis of child's speech production used by young children. So this is the first step in their acquisition process. They may repeat single words or phrases but not the sentence's structure. It is likely that the children understand what are the sentences, but they express what they understand by their own. For example, mom is hungry, mom hungry. The cat is sleeping, cat sleep. No. So whatever the simple words that they can get, they imitate to give their own message. Next, learning through correction. So it is unlikely that adult corrections are a very effective determiner of how the child speaks. The child will continue to use a personally constructed form despite the adult's repetition of what the correct form should be. So, of course, they are still children or they are still infants. And because of this, even though we correct them, let's say, okay, baby, the cat is sleeping. But the baby will still say, cat sleep. Because that's their capacity at the moment. They cannot yet say the other words. Their vocabulary or their vocabulary, their words are still quite limited. But of course, everyone learns from their mistakes, diba? That's part of learning. That's part of life. And learning through corrections when the babies are making mistakes in their speaking, we, the people around them, sometimes correct them, tell them what is the proper way to say this. And with that, they learn. Although not quickly, not instant with the snap of a finger, but still, they learn. Oh, for example, child, my teacher holded the baby rabbits. Did your teacher held the baby rabbits? Yes. Did you say that she held them tightly? No, she holded them loosely. So the mother is trying to correct the child that it's not holded, it's held or possible hold as well. Okay, so moving to developing morphology. So by the time a child is 2.5 years old, he or she is going beyond telegraphic speech, and the child indicates the grammatical function of the nouns and verbs. So here, usually the children or the infants are able to speak using the ing form in expressions, marking regular plurals with s forms, and the different forms of the verb to be, as well as using the past tense. Even though no one has taught them or they haven't gone to school yet, but by just learning from others. Yeah. So, diba, self-learning, it is part of the theory of language is innate in us. Ano? So, such as cat sitting or mommy reading a book. Boys, cats, houses, two books, or for such as are and was begin to use. The cats are sleeping. Daddy was unwell last night. Oh, such as mommy brought toys or I drank milk. So they are able during this part of the process, developing their morphology. So they are able to identify the sentence in a much more dramatic way. They are able to say their message, not just using simple words, but by using complete, grammatically correct words as well. Okay. Moving on to developing syntax. So, in the formation of questions and the use of negative. So in this process of in this stage of the process, the child goes through with three stages. So stage one occurs usually 18 to 26 months. Stage two, sorry, occurs between 22 to 30 months, and stage three occurs between 24 to 40 months. Yan. So usually the children only speaks when we or when they say something or when we ask them a question. Remember in the caregiver speech, frequently asked questions. Ano, that's where they imitate or that's where they get their words that they learn from the usual questions that we ask them. So in this stage of the process, developing syntax, it's their turn to develop questions and negatives as well. Okay? Oops, what is this? Oops, wrong. Yeah, I just delete that. So here we have the different forming of questions and forming of negatives in each stage. So during the first stage, in the forming of questions, they are able to use the WH forms, such as where or who. in the beginning of the expression. No, they're trying to find their mother or mommy. Or if they find a stranger, who is that person? Or in this stage as well, they're able to form negatives. So they're able to say no na. They don't want something. They're starting to learn how to decline something. Ano. So simple strategy of putting no or not at the beginning. So that's not a teddy bear. Uh, Not sit here, that's my spot. Ano, mga ganyan. So moving to the second stage, so more complex expressions can be formed with the WH questions such as what and why. So what is mommy doing or what mommy doing? Or why daddy is not home yet? And in the forming of negatives, they're able to use the words don't, can't, ano. Yan, additional negative forms don't, can't appear and with no and not. Yan. He not bite you, you can't dance, ha ha ha, mga ganyan. Yan. Sorry. So moving to the third stage. So the movement of auxiliary in English questions. I can have, can I have, generally quite close to adult model. So in this stage, since they are already quite old in their stage, I mean, so they're a bit old already. So they're able to imitate or they speak the same way as how older people speak because that's how they hear them speak. Ano? So, can I have a piece? Will you help me, mother? Can I have a sandwich? Something like that. And in the forming of negatives, so other auxiliary forms such as didn't and won't are able or they're able to use those words. For example, I didn't buy it or she won't let go. Again, in this in first language acquisition, we are not teaching them. They are learning by themselves. They learn by acquiring words from others or being corrected by the people around them. Ano? So, just additional trivia. So, moving. So, developing semantics. So, during the two-word stage, children use their limited vocabulary to refer to a large number of unrelated objects. Overextension. Overextension the meaning of a word on the basis of similarities of shape, sound, and size. Example, use ball to refer an apple, an egg, or, of course, a ball. So, developing semantics in this stage, since this stage is also connected to the two-word stage. So since they are still in the two-word stage, although they already have a lot of vocabulary words, still they don't have nearly enough to have a clear message. For example, your baby or the baby points at something or cat, cat, or ma, dog. But when you look at what they're pointing at, they see or you see a different animal. For infants, cats, dogs, birds, may call them as dogs. Everything. Or that a cat, a brown cat, the baby will say, "Oh, dog." A cat, a black dog, or they will say a dog. Parrot, they will say a parrot. They will still point at the parrot and still say a dog. Yeah. So that's the developing semantic stage. Ano? But because of this stage and because of our intervention correcting them, they are able to learn. And of course, keep learning until they would enter the third stage and learn how to speak the same way adults speak. Grammatically correct and with sufficient number of vocabulary words in their minds as well, in order to give much more clear messages. So that's all for the first language acquisition. Now is second language acquisition or learning. So I have written there or learning because there is, although acquisition and learning are almost similar, there is still a difference. And we will talk about that in a later slide. But first of all, what do we mean by second language acquisition? So it is the process by which people learn another language in addition to their native language. First language, L1, where areas foreign or second language is L2. A distinction is sometimes made between learning in a foreign language setting, that learning a language that is not generally spoken in the surrounding, and a second language setting, learning a language that is spoken in the surrounding community. For example, Japanese students in an English class in Japan are learning English as a foreign language, but if those same students were in an English class in USA, they would be learning English as a second language. So to clarify, when we say second language, it can be known as either foreign language or second language. Although they can be used similarly, but again, like learning and acquisition, there is a difference still. So when we say foreign language, just to clarify, so let's say you are learning a language that is not spoken or that is not used much by the people around you. For example, Mandarin, Chinese. You are here in the Philippines. You will you know how to speak Tagalog. You know how to speak English, and now you're learning how to speak Mandarin or Chinese. But are there many places in which you can use or you can speak Mandarin and other people will reply in Mandarin as well? So, no, very limited. So, you are studying Mandarin because you're going to Hong Kong, you're going to China, and other parts that uses Mandarin. And because you will do it in a other place, in a foreign land, foreign place, not in your community, so it is foreign language. Second language, on the other hand, is you're learning another language aside from your mother tongue, which is also used by the people in your community. For example, English. So our mother tongue is Filipino. So we speak with others in Filipino. But if we speak with others in English, they will also be able to speak in English or at least reply. So they will be able to understand. And because English is also used in the community, so it is second language. O Visaya, for example, Tagalog, Visaya. From let's say from Cebu City, mga taga Bisaya. They know Visayan language. So that's their first language. But going to Manila, people are using in Tagalog, but they are also able to communicate in Tagalog. They learned that. So Tagalog is their second language. Ano? Yeah. Moving on to acquisition and learning. So this is what I was talking about earlier. So all the acquisition and learning can be used interchangeably. There is still a difference between the two. So when we say acquisition, it is the gradual development of ability in a language by using it naturally in communicative situations with others who know the language. So, important part is takes place without a teacher. Example, Children who pick up a second language from long periods spent in interaction, constantly using the language with the native speakers of the language as their L1 acquisition. So acquisition, it is the natural learning. No one is teaching you. You learned by just hearing and trying to understand other people. For example, yung mga mahilig dyan mag-Korean, di ba? Wala kasi ako masyadong alam sa Korean eh. Japanese pa ako. I'm more on Japanese words. I did not go, for example, in my case, I did not go to a Japanese class to learn Japanese language. But I know Ohio means hello, good morning, daisuki, I love you, Ahoy gozaimasu, good morning, ano pa ba? Oni-chan, one brother, sister. Uh, I did not go to class to learn those words, to learn their meaning. I learned by watching anime. You see, I learned by myself. So that is acquisition, the natural development, the gradual, is slowly gradual ability of in a language by using it naturally. So you're slowly learning the language and slowly being able to apply it yourself. Ano? Next is learning. So a conscious process of accumulating knowledge of the features of language such as pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar takes place with a teacher. Result in more knowledge about the language than fluency in actual using the language. So word conscious. So you know sorry. So you know that you are learning the language. In acquisition, you don't go to a bookstore, to a library and search, oh, what's the meaning of this? What's the meaning of that? No. In acquisition, you just observe how is it used? How are they using the words? With that, you learn how the meaning, and you will just later on understand from other people, or you will have a clarification of what is the true meaning of the words. In learning, you yourself know that you are trying to learn a language. Ano? Yeah. Conscious accumulating knowledge of the features of language such as pronunciation, grammar, and vocabulary. So you know that you're learning how to speak, you're learning the different words, and you're learning how to construct sentences using that language. And you can't do this without a mentor. So someone who is already an expert of that language is the one teaching you so that you are performing it correctly. And in the results, so you know more about the language. Oh, where did English started? What are the old English words? What does this mean? What does this mean? But do you know how to use it? Yeah. Usually, when we learn, we really learn. We know about the language, but sometimes it's different. Knowing and you being able to use it are different. For examples, the attorneys. Let's go with the bad example. Okay, let's go. I just heard this from my mother, in one of the attorneys against ABS-CBN. So the attorney wanted to speak in English. So let's say, oh, why can't you understand me? Do you want? But based on mother's observation, the attorney or the congressman, I don't really remember, got stuttered. He stuttered. Maybe uh, he had some problems, and then he did not continue to speak in English. He continued speaking in Tagalog. So he's already an attorney. So he has studied. Of course, during high school, there's an English subject. College, there's still an English subject. Whatever course you are in, because some of the majors are in English. But still, he was not able to apply it and use it properly. So, example, a student can fill in the blanks on a grammar page, but knowing grammar rules does not necessarily result in good speaking, as they may not be able to speak fluently. Oh, sorry there. Sorry there. Yeah. So, you you may memorize what are the proper words. You may know the different formation of words, SDVOIO, SDVODO, and so on and so forth. You may be able to have a 100%, 50 or 60 out of 60 answers. You perfected the quiz in English. Sentence construction. Yes, you were able to create a very beautiful story or very beautiful essay. But, the word is but, can you speak using the language that you have written? Oh, so that's the difference between acquisition and learning. When we say acquisition, you learn because you are trying to apply it in speaking, in communicative situations with others who know the language. When learning, you're just really learning about the language. That's the difference between the two. Next, acquisition barriers. So, there are different ways or different things that can hamper or that can be blocking you in learning or acquiring language. So we have insufficient focus on the process. Adults have other things to do and think about, unlike very young children. So, of course, when you are busy with something, how can you focus on learning on something, or how can you have time to acquire and learn that something? Uh, Next, insufficient incentives. Oh, again, in adults. Adults already know a language and can use it for their communicative needs. Or here in our usual setting, let's say those who did not go to school. Yes, those adult people. So they already know Tagalog. Why do they need to learn English if they will not use English at all in their everyday life? Example, those carpenters, those building makers, those ano bang Tagalog doon? Anong word nga doon? Foremans. Why do they need to learn English to speak in English if they only need Tagalog, and with Tagalog they're able to communicate very efficiently already. Next, the critical period for language acquisition has passed, usually around the time of puberty. So we will tackle this critical period in our next lesson. But just to summarize it, again, remember the stages. We have the cooing, babbling, blah blah blah. So they missed a stage. A person missed a stage. They did not have much experience in, let's say, they did not have much experience in the babbling stage, so they did not develop the ability to speak consonant sounds much, and because of that it is hampering them or uh, giving them a hard time in learning to speak or in learning the language. Next is affective factors such as self-consciousness that inhibit the learning process. So of course, in learning process, in a classroom setting, how will you know if the student learned? You need to ask them, right? So of course, you ask the student, but the student is conscious. They don't have self-esteem. They're not confident enough. And how can you learn if you don't practice? That's why we have the saying, practice makes perfect, di ba? How can you learn if they don't practice, if they don't even answer. So that is one of the factors in uh, hampering language acquisition or language learning. Moving on, the age factor. Yan. Adults. Difficult to acquire another language. Why? Fully after the critical period for language acquisition has passed, yun nga, yung mga critical stages, result to loss of flexibility or openness to receive the features of another language. Back then, we are very open-minded when we are children, infants. We are very open-minded. We learn. We are just like sponges. We learn very easily from the surroundings. But as time passed by, and because of more things to do, we became less flexible in learning. Which is why, if you, for those who have very small pamangkins, mga apo, or mga anak dyan, if you notice, your children are English speakers. Why? Yung mga Tom and Jerry dyan, yung mga Gumball, mga Oggy and the Cockroaches, doon nila nakukuha. That's where they get the words. But, kayo din, siguro. Tayo, ako, yun. Back then, I'm an English speaker, but there are some factors that hamper us to speak in English. Why? Oh, example, yung self-consciousness sa akin. In my, I was English speaking, or I speak in English during my elementary days. But when I went to the school, others are not speaking in English. So I got confused. Oh, why am I the only one speaking in English? And so on and so forth. Yeah. Next. So in the case of children, yan, quicker and more effective L2 learners in class. Optimum age for learning, 10 to 16 years old, when the flexibility of the inherent capacity for language has not been completely lost. Although nothing is impossible, but optimum. So this is the best age for learning, especially another language, is the 10 to 16 years old. Yeah, okay. Another acquisition barrier is the affective factors. So yeah, self-consciousness. Ano. So if the children or the infant are stressed or not feeling good, it is hampering them to learn or to acquire language. Yeah. So the negative feelings or experiences which can create a barrier to acquisition is one, stress. They're not comfortable, self-conscious, or they're downright not willing to learn. No matter what effort will the teacher do, they created a presentation, they created a musical video. If the students will not even watch or will not even open the file, then they will not learn. So unmotivated. Moving on. So focus on the learner. So the fundamental change has been shift from concern with the teacher, textbook, and method to an interest in the learner and the acquisition process. Errors were regarded negatively and they had to be avoided. Example, a Spanish L1 first language speaker production of In the Room There Are Three Women's that shows a failure to learn correct English. Indication of the natural L2 acquisition process in action. A clue to the active learning process being made by the student as she tries out ways of communicating in language. So, although we have the teacher, we have the textbook, and yes, we have the teacher and the textbook, learning still depends on a student. So we have here a Spanish speaker, and he's practicing English. Three women's. Women is the correct word. No more S because woman is the singular. So here is the active process, the natural L2 process in action. So he is trying to apply what he is learning. He is learning second language and he is trying to apply it in class. Ano? Yan. So focus on the learner itself. Yan. So if we have input for first language acquisition, we have transfer for second language acquisition. So transfer or the cross-linguistic influence. So using sounds, expression, or structures from L1 when performing in the L2 or the second language. So positive transfer, the use of a feature from first language that is similar to the second language while performing in the second language. Example, the German learner producing I am 12 years old in English second language as a direct translation of the German structure. Yeah. So, they're trying here in the transfer. So, the format, say, let's say yung format in Tagalog, gusto kita, ano, and they're trying to imitate the format but using the language they are learning. I like you, o I like, no, 'di ba? I like. Yung in Tagalog, two words lang, gusto kita. Pero in English, I like, wala yung you. O kaya like you, wala yung I. Ano? O like you. Yan. So, they are learning by using the format of their native tongue and applying the words they learned in their second language. Ano, they're trying to learn using the second language words using the format of the first language naman. So negative transfer interference, transferring a first language feature that is really different from the second language while performing the second language. So here it's the opposite. If in positive transfer, they're using a similar format, similar grammatical construction, in the negative transfer, they're using a very different construction in the L2 naman. Moving. So, interlanguage. So, interlanguage, it is the term for a dynamic, rule-based linguistic system that has been developed by a learner of a second language or L2 who has not yet reached proficiency. A learner's interlanguage preserves some features of their first language or L1 and can also overgeneralize some L2 writing and speaking rules. Interlanguage can fossilize. When we say fossilize, it is fossilization, the process of freezing of the transition between L1 and L2 because of the inability to overcome the obstacles to acquire native proficiency in the L2. Yeah. So interlanguage basically is the learner learned some second language already but is not proficient. A very good example of this is what we call the students using Taglish or Inglog. Ang tawag ng mga estudyante ko, Inglog. Yan. English Tagalog o kaya Tagalog English. So students know to use English words. They speak in English but not proficiently enough. Because of that, they're not proficient. They cannot speak in full English. They insert some Tagalog words. And that is what we call interlanguage. And with interlanguage, we have fossilization. Fossilization is very dangerous because if a person or a student gets used to using interlanguage, yung nga, yung mga English-Tagalog or Tagalog-English, then they will be used to speaking in that way. They will not completely learn the second language. They will not be proficient in the second language. Why? Because they learned how to speak in second language while adding some first language words. Okay, so continuing. Yeah. Another hamper in um, acquisition is the motivation. We have two types of motivation in language learning. We have instrumental motivation and integrative motivation. In instrumental motivation, learners with an instrumental motivation want to learn the second language in order to achieve some goals such as completing a school graduation requirement. Does not plan to engage in social interaction using the L2. So basically, the learners, the students only learn the second language because they need it to do something. They have a goal to do something. While integrative motivation, learners went to learn the second language so they can better understand and get to know the people who speak that language, usually for social purposes, in order to take part in the social life of a community using the language. So, integrative from the word integrate. So they want to integrate to join the people using the second language. So they in integrative motivation, they want to learn because they want to use it. In instrumental, they want to learn because they need it. Ano? Yan. Okay. Moving on. So we have what we call communicative competence. So communicative competence, general ability to use language accurately, appropriately, and flexibly. So when we learn second language, we are uh, ranked or scored or observed by our communicative competence, in which we have three categories for communicative competence. We have grammatical competence, strategic competence, and social-linguistic competence. When we say grammatical competence, yun nga, grammar, involves the accurate use of words and structures, only concentrates on grammatical competence. So when you are talking, I will be observing, are you using the right words? Are you using the right tenses? Are you saying something happened in the past but you're using future tense? Ano? Next is strategic competence. The ability to use language to organize effective messages and to overcome potential communication problems. Gestures, expression, mimics, and intonations are among others some of the most strategies used. So in strategic competence, I will be looking how you deliver the messages. Are your messages concise? Are your messages clear? When you say read, is it in the past tense or you mean read in in the present tense? Okay. In the past tense, I mean. Sorry. Next, social linguistic competence. It is the ability of a learner to in producing sentences according to the communicative situation. Enables the learners to know when to say can I have some water versus give me some water according to social context. So in the grammatical, I'm observing your words. Are you saying the right words for the message? Strategic competence, are you able to deliver your message properly? Will I be able to understand? Will I have no problems in understanding? Social linguistic, are you saying the right things in this current situation? Should you really be ordering people or should you be humble and asking? Okay. So that is social linguistic competence. Next, moving on. So we have the term applied linguistics. So large scale endeavor by applying the ideas of linguistics from other fields such as communication studies, education, psychology, and sociology, concerned with practical issues involving language and its role in everyday life, represent an attempt to deal with a large range of real world issues involving language. So basically, applied linguistics is you are applying your ideas in language from other fields ano, in order to solve or to try to deal with some real world issues. In conclusion, L1 and L2 or first language and second language acquisition are quite complicated processes. Yes, there are many different stages. To understand these processes will enable the language teacher to be more sensitive to the factors involved. While first and second language acquisition reveal some similarities, they also show differences. The teacher should understand that the phenomena in first and second language acquisition are interacting. None of them are solely explanatory, so teachers should not base their teaching on just a single claim or factor involved in language acquisition. They should rather understand, analyze, synthesize, and even criticize before trying to implement any of the suggestion made for teaching. So this is for you, blessed students. So when teaching in language, like what I'm doing right now, try different things. Face to face, modular, video presentation. In teaching a language, baby talk, corrections, or let them imitate you. Slowly nga lamang. Ano? Or teach them. Ano? Yeah. Next, before we, as you can see, there are not much to talk about second language naman. Yeah. Because second language is basically learning how to speak another language other than your native tongue. So here are the different teaching methods in teaching second language. So we have the focus on the teaching method, a method of teaching foreign language derived from the classical or traditional teaching method of teaching Greek and Latin. A way to teach language is through the teaching of grammar and translation of texts. Students learn grammatical rules and then apply those rules by translating sentences between the target language or second language and their native language. Emphasis is on written language rather than spoken language. Very little attention is placed on pronunciation or any communicative aspects of the language. So this is basically you are teaching second language by learning how to translate the native language. For example, translate gusto kita into English or I hate you into Tagalog. Ano? Yan. But this is more on writing only. Next, audiolingual method. Learn to speak languages through habit formation. Therefore, need to practice drills until the new habit has been learned. So the opposite, ano? Emphasis on spoken language. Belief that fluent use of language might develop with a lot of practice repeating oral skills. Yung saying natin na practice makes perfect. So you learn the second language by practicing to use the second language. Next, communicative approaches. Languages are learned through communication and that focus on of the classroom should be on encouraging learners to engage in real life engage in speaking activities which stimulate real life communication. Emphasis on the function of language, what it is used for, rather than the forms of language, correct grammatical or phonological structures. Example, practicing question forms by asking learners to find out personal information about their colleagues as it involves meaningful communication. So similar in audiolingual method, but the difference is In communicative approaches, the learners are practicing to speak in real life situation. In audiolingual methods, maybe the learner is just practicing to say the sentence, hey, your hair is bad, or hey, you look good. They're practicing to speak that sentence. In communicative approaches, they're practicing the second language in a social context, in a role play, in a simulation. Or they will say rather, they will say, hey, you look good. What did you do with your hair? Ah, you went to what salon? Okay. So they're practicing the use of the second language in a much more realistic form. Next, task-based learning. So a solution to create different types of tasks and activities which learners in small groups or pairs have to interact with each other to exchange or solve problems. The assumption in using tasks such as plan a shopping trip with your partner by making a shopping list. To improve the learner's fluency by using L2 in an activity that focuses on a clear goal. So the result provide overwhelming evidence of better L2 uses by learners and develop communicative competence in L2. So, similar itong task-based learning to communicative approaches naman. So, if communicative approaches is similar to audiolingual method, task-based learning is similar to communicative approaches. So, in communicative approaches, again, they're role-playing using their second language or English in real-life conversations. Let's say just buying something, in task-based learning, you give them specific things to do. Okay, let's say, make a shopping list. Write down a shopping list in English in the second language. After that, kindly go up to the front, tell us how did you think of that list and why did you think of that list in English as well. So they have a specific goal to do using the second language. And because of that, they will learn more how to apply the second language, not just in written, but also in spoken forms. Okay, so that is all for today for our second lesson. I hope you understand and kindly leave some comments and suggestions. If my voice is too weak, if I'm saying too fast, on the comments section. But if you want to ask a specific question, kindly PM me. Let's do it privately. Okay, so that's all for today. Goodbye, class.